Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is October 26, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his outstanding podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with John Nelson today. Where in the heck you calling in from, John?
I'm calling in from Santa Monica, California. It's a
Uh,
beautiful day here. Little coastal fog, but not much. And got some new butterflies in the backyard, which are a big deal for us. So like we have the milkweed, and we're all butterfly farmers. So
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
uh, let me think. I think a human being to have vital and interaction with other human beings where they exchange ideas. One of the greatest things about being a human is that you have an idea center in your head. It's like where movies are started. And so when you have a meaningful intellectual discourse with another human being, you're sharing your value system, which drives your operating system. If you look at it in a computer point of view, right? And I mean, last night I spoke to Ray Feeney, an old friend of mine that worked at Robert Abel and Associates that I worked at when I was younger, when I first came to Los Angeles, and I told him that the best thing about Abel's for me was it was intellectually stimulating, right?
Yeah.
It's like you'd go there and you would be stimulated by the conversations you would have with everyone that was there, and the work you did together, and problem solving. When you have this discourse, this intellectual discourse and problem solving, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's really covering a lot of what we're going to delve into right now. I appreciate it. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Well, I prefer the newspaper, but I only get it on Sunday, and the newspaper is getting smaller, and the print is getting smaller. I'm getting older, so it's like I find myself like my aunt, sometimes getting the magnifying glass and looking at it. But I prefer the newspaper because it's sort of a snapshot in time,
Yeah.
whereas the internet is a snapshot that's updated, 1,000 times a second. So it's never, you can never sort of find. The problem with the internet is there's always another story. What I
Yeah.
like about the newspaper is you can get to the end of the newspaper and get on with your life. I mean, they've done a lot of thinking about this lately, Gerry, and I firmly believe, even though we're discussing right now on using screen to discuss, but at least we're having a human to human interaction here, is I think the more people look for validation by looking at their screen or their internet feed, it's a fool's game. It reminds me of all I know is what I learned from movies. It reminds me of a quote from Lawrence of Arabia, where Anthony Quinn is raiding this train, and he goes, "I must find something honorable. I must find something honorable." Searching the internet is like trying to find something honorable. It's just not there, you know. you know.
Amazing. That was really, really well put. And I'm all for stories, tangents, and the metaphors, and any kind of veering off. You don't have to answer the question. These are just prompts. But I want to interject right away. Did you become a reader? Because by saying the newspaper, you imply you're a reader. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to read, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
Uh, I think the newspaper was sort of a ritual that we all adapted pretty early, because from Detroit, as you know, and we didn't get the Free Press, which was the morning paper. We got the news, and I delivered the news. I was a newsboy, right? So my brothers and I all had paper routes, and it sort of passed through the family like the kid's job, right? And so the newspaper would get home, and then my father would take it, and then the kids would take the comics, and we'd all sort of fight over the sports, you know what I mean? And it was this ritual of sort of like, you know, laying out the paper and looking at it. Now, I gravitated to television very soon, and as soon as I could. And to me, I must admit, I've watched a lot of television, and but I like reading. Sometimes it can. I'm not the fastest reader, unlike my son. I read, you know, I'll read a paragraph over and over until I understand it, right? That's why it
Yeah.
takes me a long time sometimes to read scripts. And, you know, but if I'm motivated, if the story's good and the script's good, it's like, you know, willingly suspending belief. I'll just plow on, even if I might not understand it, because I'm just
Yeah.
captivated by the media. You know, the media is the message there. You know, it's getting
Yeah,
through to you
you
on
let
a,
it kind of wash over you. You know, I
yeah.
like that, and evoked a lot there, John, because that Lawrence of Arabia kind of answered the next question, but I wanted to interject. At one point, McLuhan actually said, "You can't write the great American novel because the front page of the newspaper is the great American novel." So
Wow, wow,
it's an amazing
wow.
sort of thing you were saying, like you guys are fighting, and then all of a sudden, who gets the comics now? Who gets the sports section? Like, fuck that, I'm going to TV.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah, well,
yeah, I mean,
that's
I
the,
was raised an idiot too, man. I was raised in front of
yeah.
a TV. I mean,
Well, it's
we didn't.
just the it's the youngest prerogative. My mother even had what did she have? She had a little portable potty so she could sit you in front of the television while you do your business, right? Even, you know, and so it got
As
to
a
be a,
babysitter, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Well, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Uh, because we've been humans are gifted with you know, a brain, a large brain, and a search for meaning. We're always sort of trying to find, you know, it's like the end voiceover to the Blade Runner, the version that no one likes, you know, which is, you know, uh, she wanted to know all the questions. So, you know, where do I come from? Where am I going? How much time do I have left? I might
Yeah,
add, you know, the the other thing is like, you know, who am I? What am I good for? You
yeah,
know, how can I help? You
yeah,
know, uh,
good.
um, you know, stuff like that, because you're constantly. I mean, look, I'm 71 years old, and I'm still constantly learning about the world and myself
Yeah,
and the relationship to the world. For me at this time in my life, and the analogy I use is when you're floating down a river, you don't really notice the scenery changing too much, but it's constantly moving.
yeah,
And your life is like that. You know, you start one place and you end another place, and through that, I mean, I know it's a hippie trippy analogy, but you know, you go through rapids, you go through doldrums, you know what I mean? You go through narrow spots, you go through places where it's stopped, and you're constantly sort of figuring out your relationship to the world and society, right?
yeah,
And it's like me as a young man is different than me as an older person, right? And I'm still me. It's just
yeah.
it's evolved and changed, and while being the same, it has changed and evolved. I guess that's
Yeah,
a good way.
it's really the analogy of river is beautiful, John. I appreciate it. And is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
I think it I think it's been sort of through years and years and years of evolution, and sort of even our genetic evolution, and you know, and even our psychological evolution, if that's a correct way to put it. I think it's been sort of instilled in us, but some people latch on to it more because they're interested. I'll give a good example is if I read a script and I'm not moved by the script, it's hard for me. I'll put it down. I'll look at other stuff. But if I'm really motivated by a script, I'll just page turn through it. Just like can't stop. And it reminds me sort of with if you look at people on like people who are on the Asperger spectrum, they have a gift and they also have sort of a handicap, and they can. What's interesting to me about looking at those people is their gift is so fascinating to them that it overcomes the fear of their handicap, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they dive into it sort of as like Trinity jumping through the window in the Matrix. It's like, it's like my salvation, right? And I'm not Asperger. I have people with Asperger's in my family, so I understand it. But maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm somewhere in between. But it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're born with the urge to acquire information and knowledge, and but then when we find something we like, then that is like a taste that we like, right? That we prefer. So then we'll motivate that more to find more of that information. It's like finding the subjects that you hold dear, and then it's like what Hans Zimmer once told me. He said, I had a troubled youth, then I discovered music, then I discovered movies, then I discovered music for movies, then I discovered you got paid to do music for movies, and I said to myself, gee, I'd do this for free. You know what I mean? But it's like perfect, and so he never looked back. You know what I mean? It's just, it's sort of like me and filmmaking and abstract filmmaking and sort of abstract kinetic filmmaking. And
Yeah.
when I found an outlet for that, that I could, earn a living doing it, was sort of a perfect match.
Wow. It reminds me of William Blake saying, "We become what we behold." So, John, do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, big time. There's thoughts and memories, and I have this old book from when my kid was little called Your Five Senses, and I couldn't throw it away because it always fascinated me that like all your senses overlap, but the big emotional linchpin is music and memory, right?
Yeah.
And music and memory together, um, sort of, it's like the theater of the mind. It's like movies inside your head, right?
Yeah.
And then when you see a movie or something feels almost like deja vu, it's like you're watching a movie and you go, wow, this is really working. This really feels like an old shirt that I've worn before. You know what I mean? And what it is someone has dropped into the collective unconscious of a certain piece of music working with a certain visual stimuli, and that's the movie in your mind, right? You know what I mean? And you, so the linchpin of emotion to me is music and memory, and so thoughts can be emotional.
We're going to get into both of those. That was great. Fill in the blank, John. I don't know what I think until I.
Well, it's sort of like the Socratic method where you know who you are, but you have many different personalities, and I think there's an interior dialogue between the confident John and the insecure John. You know what I mean? And and you look at those things and you sort of have this kitchen table conversation between all the people that are you, and then when you come to an agreement, it's like a family arguing over the last pork chop. When you come to an agreement, then you go, okay, that's what I think, at least now. You know what I mean? And then that's a moving target because you're still on the river going down to the ocean. You know what I mean? So,
That is so
I mean,
good. My mom said when I says, "Could I interview you?" She goes, "Yeah, but everything I say today, I might say differently tomorrow." But McLuhan says, "I don't know what I think until I say it." Joan Didion says, "I don't know what I think until I write it." So I think what you were saying was, "I don't know what I think until I have an interior dialogue on the subject." You
yeah,
know,
to a degree. I mean, but there are other things like uh, there are other things that I know I like. I just see it. Like I'll hear a piece of music, and I really like fast 16th notes for some things, and repetitive patterns, and Philip Glass type of music like that.
yeah,
And it's just, and I immediately went to that. I immediately went to like abstract animation, like Len Lai or Oscar Fissinger or Stanley Kubrick's, stuff in 2001. And I got to me it was like seeing that was like putting on the old shirt again. It's like,
yeah,
wow, like so you you're attracted to things just sort of like bugs to a light,
yeah,
and that stuff, you don't know where it comes from, you just immediately like it. It's
yeah,
like tasting food that is really good to you, and then you go like,
yeah.
wow. Yeah.
It's your gut, your instinct, your impulse. I mean, that's exactly what this series is about, is getting people to act in a more perceptual way than a conceptual way. But can humans think without language?
Yeah, sure. You can, you the well, language, it depends. Like interior dialogue, is interior dialogue language based, or emotion based, or memory based, or you know if you have this interior dialogue, like I would think most artists do have some form of interior dialogue, you know. So is that language based? You know, I think communication between humans is language based and visual and smell and rhythmic, right? And all of the above all mixed together. Like, what is a haiku? Well, it's rhythmic, it's
Yeah,
it's musical, it's language, it's thought, it's performance,
yeah,
so that's the fascinating thing. That now, when I do a lot of thinking about AI now, and really what we've done in creating computers is we've created machines that mimic our mind, and really humans are good at this. That's what a movie camera is. It mimics the thoughts and images and sounds we have in our mind, right? And so we create machines in our own to extend ourselves, but they're sort of mirrors of what we are, right? And so when you look at a computer is like that. And that's why people are fascinated. In fact, I've been trying to understand why people are so fascinated with their phones, and it's because they have a friend of their own creation with their own values all stored there. And so it's easier for them to go into that bubble and look at that because it's all pre-chewed, as opposed it's probably healthier for them, Gerry, to
yeah,
take a walk into Venice and see all the different people that aren't in their bubble, or a walk anywhere, like Nebraska or New York City or Chicago, and just because it will instead of pre-chewing your meat
yeah.
intellectually, it will force you to like think about what you want to eat.
Yeah,
you know
John, your metaphor there is beautiful, and it's exactly what we're going to get into, because here's Chomsky. Language is not just words; it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you
Mhm.
do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Mm, I can only give you I can only give you an example of that, which is if I ask a director, sometimes I've gotten in trouble because I've asked a director, what do you really want here? And it's before they really know what they want. So they can take that sometimes not so well. So, as a young man, I learned this. And so what I say is, well, I still sort of couch it like, what should this feel like? Right.
Yeah.
And that's a better approach, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's like they can internalize it through their own filter and say,
Yeah.
what should this feel like? I can tell you what it should feel like. And then I I pretty good at this stuff. So I'll look at it and go, okay, that sort of I can connect the dots between that and this imagery and that and this part of the script and that and this thing, the emotional or the emotional story that you're telling, to try to reverse engineer the engineering it takes to make that emotion feel like that. Does that make sense?
That made a
Yeah.
lot of sense because you have ESP, John. That's it. The next question is, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings? I know it's both and it depends, but just your observations of humans in general. I mean, you kind of answered it with the last one because you're saying I can't ask these guys intellectually. I have to ask them feeling wise, but you just your observations in general. If you had to go, are we more feeling or more thinking? What would you say?
Uh, I say probably feeling, and
Yeah,
but we're thinking all the time, and it's
yeah,
it's it's just we're led around by our emotions.
yeah,
Like some days you wake up and you can really conquer the world, right? And some days you wake up and you just want to go back to bed. Like and a lot of that, my father was a chemist, and a lot of that he would always say, well, it's your biological level of uh, serotonin or something. You know what I mean? Like, you're either in a good mood or a bad mood. But I think it's, you have to. A friend of mine who got a degree in, Martin Piszczalski from Ann Arbor. I don't know if you know him, but he got a degree in psychology and computer science, and he said it's very important to think of every day as a new start.
yeah.
And I really, because he's observed me when I first moved out to Los Angeles, and I would just get like work really late and then wake up really early, and then just like it would be the same thing, and it'd be blah blah blah. And he really taught me, it's like you put it to bed, you sort of clean the desk or leave it in a place you want to get back to it, and then you go to bed and you accept the new day as a new start, just like the world accepts the new day as a new start. And it's a tremendous it it's a really good way to give yourself the opportunity to relax and sort of just say, okay, it's not a continuation, it's just not the endless drone of nose grindstone connection. You have a new day, and with a new day, new opportunities exist.
It's really beautiful. It's inspiring because two things. Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think." I'm like, "Good luck. How do you turn your brain off?" Or like people who meditate, they go, "Now think about not thinking." And there's a car on my street with a bumper sticker, and it says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I'm like, "Well, don't believe everything you feel." So here's two questions from Alan
Yeah,
Turing in
yeah.
the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Or is the soul a function of thinking? I mean, like, it
Very
is
good.
it yeah is it's all interconnected, because what makes a soul, what the it's the overlay. I've done a lot of thinking about this because I worked on a movie about this with a big quote in it. It's like about robots. Can robots think? And I had to one of the things I had to do was, and we were all great studies of the human face, Gerry, all of
Yeah.
us, and we're all experts at understanding the human face from when we're about 3 years old, you know what I mean? And we only get better at that. That's why people see the uncanny valley when they see people who aren't thinking beings. And what we do is we register, looking at a face, of how the thought processes is happening in the computer inside our head, right?
Yeah.
So we have like tells like up, look up and to the right, you know what I mean, or whatever, where you're looking through the Rolodex of your mind, right? And the soul. So I had to make this robot seem like he could think and feel. So I had to put pauses in his functioning to show that to humans, because humans, we're a human-centric universe, right? You
Yeah.
know, like we see faces in, I see, when I go to Utah, I see faces in rocks, you know what I mean? And so the overlap of the soul, the line I think there is when does a personality construct become the bitter mote of a soul? And what, it's a beautiful line, but what I chose to take from that is that the soul is an overlay of our values, our genetics, our upbringing, you know, and the little thing that every parent knows, which is every human being is completely different. They may be incredibly like you, but they're endowed with inalienable rights, but also inalienable. I say, I don't say the proper word there, but they're endowed with a personality that is distinct and could be moments genetically given to them from, you know, an uncle you didn't know, you know, or an aunt
John,
you didn't know.
you are very articulate, and again, totally ESP, and that's what this series is about, is inventing new questions. It's not so much
Mhm.
answering. I mean, you answered that question with two great questions, but you really articulated it well. And the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Uh, it depends on what, to me, the question is, it depends on a value assessment and analyzation, where you have to analyze your values and weight them. Um, I mean, like the American election is a good example of that right now for people. You know what I mean? Because they have values, and they weight their values and say, well, I'm going to let this value slide because I want this other
Yeah.
thing, right? You know, and so to answer your question, back to machines, is like, you know, what values are the machines going to be using in their you know, scales of justice evaluation, right? You know, and you know, I worked on Terminator 2, so I vote they should never get the launch codes. It should that's just way too important.
Yeah.
But you know, it's troubling, because in warfare, I'm sure you could, if you had an AI team of drones, I'm sure they would be quite dynamic, a dynamic fighting force. And you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like they think faster. I got interviewed by an AI company, and they asked me, because they were talking about deep fakes, because I did this thing for Blade Runner 2049 where I brought Sean Young back. And I had to go in and to get her to feel real, I had to go back in and reverse engineer her emotions from you know, from, like, I would find an emotion in the original Blade Runner, reverse engineer that back into the performance. And so what they did with deepfakes is they basically did they programmed all that criteria into a computer to do all that stuff I did here with this computer, you know, by analyzing it. And I saw it. My quote to them was, I said, "So you created a computer like my brain that did all the stuff I did and never sleeps and is smarter than me and just never stops." And he corrected me. He said, "No, we've created a machine that does simple things well, and beyond that doesn't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Well,
and
put.
um and that's where I think that's the thing on AI for me. That's sort of the my thought on AI. But to me, to answer your question, can computers think and have a soul, or computers? It just comes like, what is the rubric of the values that control their scale of justice? You know, like the five laws. You know, like the five laws are pretty basic. If
Yeah.
that's if the five laws are the scales of justice, then everything should be okay. But science fiction has taught us the five laws always get broken. You know, so
Yeah, like hell has emotions. But John, that was really good. The next question is, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
it's there. It's connected. You know, because you some days you you feel more ambitious to say, where am I on the river, and how can I make this the best trip down the river that I can make it, right? You know, and so you're looking for sort of things to do, searching for meaning, and but it's connected. It's like, are you what the question again, Gerry, is what pursuing?
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning? And let me just set it up because I will interject. I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
not,
that's that's
you
that's
know,
good. You
I
know,
know
yeah,
it's,
happiness may be temporary. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You know,
yeah,
but it's funny you mentioned that book, because I someone gave it to me last week, said you should read this book, and I haven't read it. My
yeah.
son, of course, has read it, and he said it's really good. You should read it. So you know,
Well,
but you
it's
know,
just, it is like a lot of these binaries and duality things are, is it more this or more that? I know it's both and it depends. And it's not so much I'm trying to get you to register I'm more this. As one woman said, when I says, is it more this or more that, she goes, the word more doesn't function in your question. It's like what they call it, false dichotomy, whatever. But it is. Let's go to the next one. This is does the brain, again, the more question, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
yeah, man, that's a good question, because it's chicken or egg. But you know, you're I think, I mean, the it's sort of both, which know is
That's all right, John.
yeah.
In Ann Arbor, you would have loved this. I did this salon in Ann Arbor, and I asked people, "Is it more this or more that?" And great Detroit film guy goes, "It's both." And one of the Ann Arbor students goes, "That's a cop out."
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
goes,
like that.
"No,
I felt like
not
saying
a
that's a cop out, you know, to say
that's not
it's
a
both,
that's not a
you know.
cop out. The wording. See, it's really the wording on my questions. It's me and you versus the wording on my questions. We're in the same team, and the wording can be changed. So if you go, it's both, that's fine. I'm
Mhm.
all for it. I'm not asking you to say, oh,
But
it's more.
one stimulates the other, and then
Yeah,
there's this reverse, you know, do loop that goes and stimulates back,
yeah.
and so it's echoing back and echoing forward at the same time, but
It's
it
a
all goes
Mobius
back.
strip. Yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
Mobius strip. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Well, what's faster, John? Speed of light or speed of thought?
You answer a question with the question. The
I
the
like
speed
that.
of light the speed of light is a thought,
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I
you know.
that's what I
So,
say.
I would say there would be arguments for both,
Yeah,
you know, because you could say the speed of light is a thought, so it's faster because you can think it. It lives on a analysis level above, the speed of light. But the speed of light, by its technical speed, if you clocked it,
Yeah.
how fast does a thought come into your main brain? How fast is the speed of light? There would be an argument to say, well, yeah, intellectually, it's this. The thought, you know, predates the thing, but numerologically or technically,
Yeah.
if you had a way to measure neuron speed, you could say speed of light might win.
Yeah. And Audre Lorde said, the poet said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, I think right now the questions that come to mind all the time are like, can't you? We have problems in our world. We have people not listening to each other. We have climate is a problem, and then we have the new kid on the block. Certainly is AI. And if you look at AI as in a way, it's what we've talked about before, which is humans create tools to extend themselves. So
Yeah.
it's like Kurzweil's thing. That you're extending the human body, even by the thing they invented when we were in college in Ann Arbor, the spirocentric knee. Well, that was, now they have body parts that can replace old worn out body parts, and now you extend your capabilities basically by getting a Tommy John surgery. A pitcher can pitch longer in baseball,
Yeah.
and with so intellectually we're extending ourselves with AI, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing that you can't do, it's like Pandora's box. It's like, how are you going to keep them back at the farm after they've, used, meta, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think you have to embrace the change, but put values on it. And that to me is again, don't give them the launch codes. What's the scales of justice? How are they evaluating that? But if we look at that, if we used AI to solve climate change or to make people less polarized, politically, I
Yeah.
would be all for it. But right now, AI is just the beginnings of that. But think about, we were all raised with television. Think about a generation baby born today. We raised his whole life with AI. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's just it's gotta affect him somehow. Maybe good or bad. Like I used to have a Franklin planner. I still have it, or not Franklin planner. Thomas guide. That's it. I used to have a Thomas guide in my car, and I still do. But I never use it, and I'm probably more stupid because I don't use it. I'm just led around by the nose by the lady in the dash saying turn left at the corner.
Yeah.
And so it's an extension, but we also have to give up things. Like I often think, well, shit, people are going to have to learn how to grow vegetables because they're going to need, at some point, they're going to need to know. you know.
I don't know, John. We cut down 3 trees in our yard, and all of a sudden this tomato plant grew, and we
Mhm.
didn't have to do anything, and we had tomatoes for months. And I mean, it was
Wow.
amazing. But I mean, we both kind of are like you. We're not quite as diligent gardeners, but we like to garden flowers and vegetables. But
Well,
that's
it's just like people think that food comes from the store. You know what I mean? And it's just, as much as we extend ourselves and become more
yeah,
extended through all these gadgets that we have, our phones and our computers and
yeah,
whatever. um, there's this other thing that goes back to me. it's one of the things I got into. I got into gardening during the pandemic, and I really enjoy it because
Yeah.
it's a very you see the process of life, and it's comforting. It's like to look at something that is just like, this is just what it is. It's got a truth. You know what I mean? You
Gardening
put
has
water
a
on it.
truth. The
Yeah,
earth
it
has
has
a
the truth.
truth. Seeds and
Yeah,
plants have truth. I love that word. So what new
yeah.
toy do you suggest?
New toy?
Yeah. See,
Well, I'm
people would
old.
answer my
I'm
yeah, you
older, and I like riding bikes. I have an electric bike, and I like that because it
oh,
gets me out, and I'm tall, so I have a lot of wind resistance, and it makes me have a broader range because I really do believe that we need to we need to go out into society and brush up against each other. I think it's important, right?
really good.
And this is probably the best Zoom. I will compliment you, Gerry, because this is probably the most intellectually best Zoom call I've ever had, right? You know
Thank
what I mean? But because intellectually we're rubbing against each other
yeah,
idea wise. But I think in society in general, as opposed to looking at our screens, we should get out
yeah.
and actually, see each other, interact with each other, sort of rub shoulders with each other in a
So
Chicago
it's a it
analogy,
that's a
and
great thought, John, because we do bump into each other in Venice on the boardwalk and elsewhere. But,
Mhm.
what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
um, I worry about uh, sometimes I worry about our country, you know what I mean, and how I lived in Europe for a couple years, and it really brought me back to I love the time that I had there, but I missed it because I'm an American. And my grandfather was an immigrant, so I fully, I don't know what his life was like. I found out a little bit about it, but to me, I'm an American, and when I was away from America, I missed it, and I missed it because it was what I was used to, but also I felt like it it gave me things. It free what was it? Freedoms, rights, and responsibilities. You asked me what my go to bed worrying about. I worry about that people want to take the rights, but they don't want to do the responsibilities. And we all need to be good citizens, like a
Yeah,
citizen of Rome. We need to be a good citizen of the world and of our country, right? And so part of that is try to not be an asshole, try
yeah,
to use the golden rule the best way you can, and try not to just say, I'm just gonna get mine and fuck everybody else. And
yeah,
that's what worries me is sort of the lack of empathy. I mean,
yeah,
I know the world's a tough place. I know there are people, there are people who want to kill other people. I mean, like, what do you do with those people? It's like it, but you have to have some form of empathy to understand even the people that hate you, right? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And at some point I worry about like how maybe AI can help with that. I don't know, but I see sometimes the earth going like that. And then I also see like, you know, with homeless people, there for the grace of God go I, you know what I mean? Or you know, people I've known who've sort of had mental problems. So the you you
Like
you
in
you have to
Venice
have empathy at the same time. You have to be a realist to say what's the greater good. You know what I mean? And that's what makes me worry is I would like people of a high moral standard to be able to have that value system that effectively balances the decision-making process for the greater good with a lot of common sense, as opposed to just, like, we all live now and just it's weird. It's just like sound bites. We believe sound bites instead of common sense.
Yeah. It's really well put, John, because in Venice we tend to say the earth is everyone's home. No one's homeless. There's houseless people. But we're going to get into it's amazing how you anticipate almost every question coming up in the answer previous to the question being asked. But this is what McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, John, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, yeah, I think you're right about art. I think that art is the antenna for the society is really a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And why we ignore it, because human nature, is sad to say, is somewhat selfish, right?
Yeah.
And it's you got to work on that. You have to, you know try to teach your children and teach yourself. You know what I mean? Like you know everyone has a right. At least it's America. Everybody has a right to do what they want, as long as they're not breaking the law or doing something immoral or illegal, right? But I think we need to have empathy, but in a world where we also say, we just can't give away free shit all the time, because we have a system of checks and balances that, if we print more money and give it away, we'll have inflation. So you have to have like some form of balance that sort of figures out, okay, well, I want this and I want that. These two conflict. Okay, how am I going to make decisions when they two conflict, right?
Yeah.
What's going to drive? And again, it comes down to values. It's like a value system to say, what do I hold as a higher point of order, right?
Well, do artists have moral obligation?
Uh, I think artists are sort of like, they're they're on the tiger. You know what I mean? They're. I think I think artists are that you learn everything in your life, and you take your whole experiences and your genetics and your education and your upbringing and your value system, and then all of a sudden you learn it, and then you become the filter that filters society and reality, and then what comes out of you is your unique perspective on that. And you might even not an artist might even not know why they're doing it. They're it's like the quote in Lawrence of Arabia, where he goes, he's riding the whirlwind. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes with art, I think the artist is they're vibrating to the music. It's just coming out of them, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they a unique uh, situation of life has put them in this place on the river at that time with these paddles, right? and
Really
they're
good.
and they're 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 taking in everything that is society bringing to them, and they're using themselves, and they're filtering it through themselves and issuing out the response, and that is it's sometimes I often think, like, you once asked me why I made this abstract film in Ann Arbor. I did it because I had to do it. I don't know why I did it. It's
Yeah.
just I liked it and I had to do it. Right. You know what I mean? And that it changed my life. Right. You
It's
know?
amazing, John, because you really nailed what with the Pound saying artists are the intent of the race. You kind of described how Bob Dylan says, he goes, I'm just a radio man and this shit's just coming through me. I'm the
Yeah.
radio and so you know, I really appreciate that because the moral obligation thing in an artist really came out in someone we both knew, Mike Kelly. He said, and I'm curious your reaction to this line. Mike said, art is making your problems other people's problems.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it if you look at it as a value judgment on problems, they're making uh, those ideas or problems as ideas, cogent ideas for you, right? That you look at and you perceive and filter through your own
Yeah.
litmus, and say it. Because I mean, when I look at a cool piece of art from Mike or Jim Shaw or any or who is it, the guy who used to draw the subway, Keith Haring, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He just sort of bubble up. You look at it and you go, wow, there's part of me that intellectually uh, gets it and digs it. But I have a friend who's got a degree in art history, and we argue about this all the time. It's like she says you got to know about art to fully like it, and I say no. It's just
No, you
it's if it's got the swing for you, it means a thing for you. You know what I
that's
mean? So
that's
so you just you react to it.
that's Marshall's favorite line is the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. So are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
uh, I'm a creature of habit. So I would probably, if I were truthful, I would probably say I'm more suspicious of new ideas.
Yeah.
But I realize that they're they're really important, you know, and because change is I know it sounds like duh, John, but change is good, like and we're all changing whether we like it or not, Jerry. We're on that river whether we like it or not, right?
Yeah.
So that the acknowledgement of that is really sort of freeing, because then you go, well, change is going to happen whether I want it or not, so I have to embrace change. And I don't know, it's like that's it. That's sort of my thought on it, I
Well,
guess.
that's the biggest thing I learned from Frank Zappa is how to embrace contradiction. So that is, I
Hmm.
mean, it's funny when I say, "Are you more afraid of old ideas than new ideas?" A lot of people go, "I'm not afraid of ideas," and then they go, "Well, come to think of it, there's a lot of old ideas. I hate white supremacy," and then they go, "Well, I'm a little suspicious." So it is again it's a false
Yeah,
dichotomy.
no, yeah, old ideas that have not, like, like, look, we fought the Civil War. Slavery was outlawed in 1865, but we still have an intellectual form of it that has gone
Exactly.
on. You know what I
That's
mean? So it always amazes me
yeah.
that that you know, we still have racism in America, even though it doesn't amaze me. It amazes me because we fought a war over it over
Yeah.
100 years ago. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And
Yeah, and I thought it's like you just have to move on. You know what I mean? But
hello. move on and find a new re-evolution. It's not de-evolution, it's re-evolution, which is revolution. You re-evolve. That's why George Carlin said, how can you ever have a civil war? It's like, well, that's because most people think civil means acting. They think civil means acting nice to each other, but it also can mean between two cities. So it's just this. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, I think I can. Um, I I'm the youngest of three boys, and so I uh, for when I was little, I my first memory is in the crib playing with. There was an abacus in the crib, and I was playing with the abacus, looking out at the front yard of our street. So it was sort of like it was playing with a counting machine while I was looking at an image of the street in the sun.
Wow.
And and,
How
and so
that's like the perfect lead to be a special effects Oscar
yeah,
winner. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yes,
So do you
yes.
think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, I think it's a blessing. I
Yeah.
think, but what's really strange about it is the older I get, the more I regress. I have deep memories with emotional from when I was really little. You know what I mean? Like all the 30s, 40s, 50s. That's all good, but that's all sort of you know packaged into a place. And with the older I get, the more I go. It's like I just talked to a friend of mine, and we're still, both of us are still dealing with sort of retiring from our careers, and he goes, what I find myself doing is realizing that I go back to the person I was before I started this career trip, and
Wow.
I embrace that, right? And I told him, he's a writer, he's written many famous movies, and I told him, I said, that's very true, because I find myself doing the same thing,
Yeah.
going back to, because we all go on these these trips on the river, like,
Yeah.
from different places. But when you're going down there, and you take career out of it, and then you're left with the value system that got you to being 18 or 20, and
Yeah.
that value system is still there when you're 70, right? You know what I mean? And it's
So
just that you've had all these diversions that have taken your mind off, like dealing with the big problems in life. Like my wife would always say, I was sort of a workaholic because it it saved me from having to deal with the difficult self-analysis uh,
yeah.
problems of realizing, like, who you are and where you're going. All
Oh,
you'd had to do was make a movie that was really hard, so
yeah.
you could dedicate your whole being to that thing. And in a way, it was, even though it was incredibly difficult, it was freeing, because you didn't have to multitask to like everything. You just
Yeah.
had one big monotask, and that controlled
Amazing.
everything.
Yeah,
You know?
John, that is so well put. I think everybody does what you just explained. And you keep referring to this river, and it's funny because Susie and I just watched African Queen a couple weeks ago, and
Yeah.
it was like it took me right to Cinema Guild, the oldest cinema society in Ann Arbor, watching it
Yeah.
on their screen in the old A&D. I mean, that was pre-career, you know?
Yeah. Oh
And so
yeah. Yeah.
so, going along with that, tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Well, my oldest brother um, was really how he and my father was like me, was a lot, worked a lot, and my oldest brother was sort of we had three boys, and he was 5 years older than me, and then my other brother was 2 years older than me, and he really made a big impact on me because he was really smart and really athletic and he loved me too, and he taught me all these things he taught as a kid, and I realized that the bonding between the oldest and the youngest is not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I always said to myself, I can I can never be as smart or as athletic as Bill. He's
Yeah.
just way too, I'll never be there. And and then he graduated from college, and then he had schizophrenia, and so he became schizophrenic, and he lived it out his life, and he had jobs, but he was constantly dealing with his issues. And I think Bill, like having Bill as a role model when I was a kid, it was just like he was really cool. It taught me a ton of stuff, but then I also said to myself, I could never be as smart as him. I can never be as athletically good as him.
Yeah.
And so it taught me to work really hard
Yeah.
because I knew that. And even when we would get together later, he'd look at me with this look at his face, like, I'll always be older than you, John. And it's just sort of like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm 5 years old, you know what I mean? And that's okay,
Yeah.
because that whole thing melded with who I am, which is
Yeah.
different than him, and different than my father, and different than my mother, different than my other brother. And and sort of that interaction of looking at it and going, well, I guess I need to work harder. It made me work harder, right?
A
And
better
that's a
person.
good thing. Yeah.
It's amazing, John, because I was gonna ask you eventually, because I know you talk about the workaholic, where'd you get your work ethic from? And most people say from their parents, but I gotta tell you, if you look up work ethic in Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down, it says, "This could be a scam from consumer capitalism." Everybody, when I do ask them, "Where'd you get your work ethic from?" They say their
Mhm.
parents. Because we come from that generation. Our parents was like, "Go get them, work hard." So now the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, right, right.
You
They'd
really,
always say for us, they would always say, "Get a job, get a haircut and a job." You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah. But John, you were really articulate there. I really appreciate how you speak, because I get a picture of it in my mind. Same question outside your immediate family, someone who had a role model or had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Uh, I think, uh, well, there are so many people. I mean, like, you know, I could cop out and just say Stanley Kubrick, affected me greatly, because he did. But
That's fine.
really,
That's a good.
I would say maybe Gerhard Schlonsky affected me
Okay,
really greatly.
what'd you get from Gerhardt mainly?
Um, Gerhard is just like a a a really intense, great guy. But when he wants to do something, human nature, at least for me, constantly says, you have this interior dialogue where you go, well, is that a right thing? Should you do this? Is it the right thing to do? And one thing I learned from Gerhard is, like, sometimes you can just short circuit that whole interior dialogue and go, yeah, we should do this. Let's do it. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And he doesn't, at least he taught me back then, when I was living at the New Old Brick, which was the loft we had in Ann Arbor,
yeah,
that if you wanted to do something creative, you just do it. There didn't need to be a tremendous amount of uh, intellectual discourse on why you should.
Should, yeah,
You should just embrace it and do it, and then it will lead you someplace, right?
yeah,
And I did a BAFTA discussion on this online, which is actually a pretty good interview with me. And I said sometimes when you're trying to often I get told, well, this needs to look like something that's never been done before, and I say, well, okay, and then I get back to like, how should it feel?
yeah,
How should we? And then what I do is I use a lot of designs in nature because things have been done in nature before and they seem very organic. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And I try to get it. But in this interview, I said sometimes you might even not know exactly where you're going, but you know where you're going is the right direction, and you're constantly hammering down on this is the right direction. Let's take a look at 5 things that interest us about this direction. Okay, what are the most important of these? Which work, which, some you discard, some you keep, and then you have the 5 that are the most important. Then
yeah,
those begin to create a road work between those 5 important ideas, and then they create a neural network of interchanging ideas between those 5 ideas. Then you have then you have something that's an intellectual idea that's stimulating, that's sort of self-generating questions and answers because it has a logic of a value system, you know.
yeah. John, you really summarized 2 things so well there. I worked in a art space in Venice for 7 years putting on events called Sponto Gallery, and his name came from spontaneous and pronto. He put them together, Sponto. So it's just that, be spontaneous and do it now. Why, like, go dive in. And there's
Mhm.
a Louis Buñuel quote I would get to uh, eventually in our conversation here, and it's, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, 99% of people would go, that's great. I love that. And one guy goes, that's bullshit, because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. So I morphed it into the question. The cliche goes, the journey's more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important? Well, everything you described is what people say. Well, you have to have a focus and a destination. No, you don't. The people who changed the world forever in Paris in the 20s, they were called flaneurs, and it was called psychogeography. And they just wandered around aimlessly. And like Joyce said, had an epiphany in everydayness. So that's what I got from Gerhard. It's like, let's go for this. It's like, wait a minute, can't we reason? No, just go for it and see what happens. It's like that spontaneity.
Well, you have to trust your gut with like what's interesting and good about the action you're taking, and
Yeah,
what and it, like tasting a good taste, what feedback does it give you
yeah,
when you're arranging stuff on a table and you go, all of a sudden you start looking at things together, you're putting them in slides in a slide projector, projecting it on something else, then you go, oh, look at that, I like that, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And then you it just sort of like is this feedback loop. But oftentimes, I mean, we've talked about interior dialogue a lot with me because I do think it is that. But oftentimes what I learned from Gerhardt was that don't let that get in the way of
yeah,
of trusting your gut to
yeah,
lead you to something that you like, right?
yeah,
And but I do think, because I'm constantly, I work in the film business. It's a business, right? So like, and I'm constantly, there's this other analytic that goes on top of creative decision making when there's a budget involved, and you really have to sort of like pre-guess to say, you know, at the end of Thursday, this needs to stop. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and we need to find a way to use X amount of money to do 1,000 shots for this movie, right? You know, so
Yeah,
you're constantly, you have to you have to be as creative as possible inside uh, uh, um, inside a plan that has a beginning and an end, even though life has no beginning and end.
yeah,
You know, um, in some ways, human endeavor projects have, it's important to have a beginning and end because you constrain yourself to have the baby as opposed to being, you know, eternally pregnant, right?
yeah.
You know.
That's, what you described is what we call the resonating interval, the beginning and the end, and the in-betweenness, the gap is where the action is, and that's what
Mhm.
McLuhan learned from James Joyce in Finnegan's Wake, is that you carefully make plans, then you do the opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a hard one. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yeah, my father was Lutheran, but we didn't really go. My mother was Southern Baptist, and we did go. And but the Baptist church that was in Grosse Pointe Woods, Michigan, where I grew up, there was a really good minister. He had a radio show. He actually, I think, in the radio show he preached, and some guy who robbed a bank gave the money in and stuff like that. But he ended up divorcing his wife and marrying his secretary, and the people at the church who passed out booklets say "Don't smoke, don't drink." They were Germans who fought in World War II on the other side. So, you know, it's like I was constantly doing this analysis to say, well, okay, I get it. You know, love your love your neighbor. You know, try to be a good person. Try to be more like Jesus. But you know, nobody's perfect. Look at the minister. He like divorced his wife, married his secretary. Look at these guys who are telling me not to smoke or dance or drink. They were
Yeah,
fighting on the other side, right? You know, so
yeah,
it's like life is difficult. You
yeah,
know, try. You know, it nothing. No analysis is perfect, and you have to just take a look at, say, okay, you know, humans are perfect, and but
yeah.
you still have to have a higher goal of a value. You know, like loving, being more like Jesus is not a bad thing, right?
There
You know
you
what I
go,
mean?
beautiful. John,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
pray?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
When I'm really um you know, like troubled, like I can't figure something out, or I'm just at the mercy of my emotions, or if I, you know, if I find out that someone I love is sick, um, you know, I do pray, and I look, I've thought about this a lot, Jerry, and it's like religion is faith. That's what, because you have to have faith in it. You know what I mean? It's hard to prove it, right?
yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, it's a personal choice. That religion is a personal choice for everything. I think
yeah,
it's the interior dialogue between you and uh, a being that you think is like all the things you don't know, all the things that are greater than your consciousness. It's a
yeah,
relationship between you, what I can define, and what I can't define, right?
yeah,
And then I have personally think that there's good trumps evil in the universe, but that's my own opinion. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well,
And
amazing again, you're like anticipating almost exactly to the word the upcoming question after this one, though. This one is, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I don't know. We all like reaffirmation, I guess, but you know, maybe welcome home. you
I
know,
love that. I get that one
uh,
often. So
you
here's the
know,
question. Yeah, here's the question you anticipated perfect, John. Do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I I don't know. I think I've often said evil does exist, so I guess I would say it does exist, but I think that, you know, it all comes down to, you know, again, people have decided the scales of justice for one thing override the scales of fairness and fair play or whatever on the other thing. Like, my cause is so great, my religion tells me to kill people of other religions, even though my religion is about peace and brotherhood, right? You know,
Yeah.
so you just have to at some point know that, you know, we're all humans and we're all making those value judgments, and we need to make them wisely, right?
Yeah. I want to send you my essay I worked on for months. Can art stop war? Because it's like, how about an old idea like that? Please, could we get rid of war? It doesn't work. Can we move on? But
Right,
this
right.
is this is actually the hidden question to that is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola Detroit born, I believe, or a Michigander at heart, said he stole from the samurai and the mob. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK
Mhm.
said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of prompts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, to quote, I would quote Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make you feel inferior without your cooperation. You know what I mean? It is you. I think I've had people that I don't like, and I've had people that I've worked with well, and people that I realized early on that any interaction with them was just going to be taken for their advantage and for usually at my disadvantage. So at that point, what I try to do is just deal with them as little as possible. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And just say, look, I'm trying to be, straightforward here, but it's not like I'm having a deep conversation like I would have with you, right?
yeah.
Because the way someone said to this rather a friend of mine, Charlie Gibson, I won't tell who he's talking about, but he goes, yeah, you just can't trust them. It's like part of them you can talk about jazz with, and the other part is searching your body for nice knife insertion points. And you at that point you go, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's
Yeah,
just so you just try to basically intellectually,
yeah.
emotionally not leave your legs wide open for someone to come in and kick you.
Yeah, it's actually this too, John. Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said
Mhm.
villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. Gregory Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
uh I think, to be honest, I think probably it does, because I think that people, lots of people are just crazy enough to go, what's the downside? You know what I mean? And you, at some point, the downside needs to be expressed to them. in
Yeah.
no uncertain terms. Like, if you point a gun at me, you might get hurt. You know,
Yeah.
you know, and uh, so. I mean, I would say, I mean, there's a lot right now on the bill about, I think people shoplifting and having under a certain thing. I think people have gamed that system, where they know they're not going to get caught, so they just go and do it. And
Yeah.
um, I mean, we need to find a way to use. I mean, this is where I'd love AI. How can you use AI to try to reinforce people who are smart enough to do things that are not criminal, but use in a tremendous amount of human endeavor to do criminal activity?
Yeah.
How do you take that energy and say, well, if you just touch these bases, like first, second, and third, you could get to home without being called out.
Yeah, it's all the
I love baseball, so I'm using a lot of baseball analogies. You
well,
know what
no,
I
it's
mean?
also how do somebody hijacks the Super Bowl screen and, culture jams it. Usually they go, dude, if you come and work for us, we won't throw you in jail. So it's like the kids who really kind of learn how to hijack and subvert the system usually get swooped into the system because they know, hey, you got to work for us or we're going to put you in jail.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, it's who is it? The smartest hackers, they have open hacking sessions, to try to get the best and the brightest. Like,
yeah,
can our can our system withstand these hackers, right? And
yeah,
then they all get hired.
yeah. Well, this goes to James Joyce, who was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He ran Volta Cinema in Dublin, and he basically said, "This is stupid." He checked out. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, look, drama in general is in movies in specific, is about taking analysis of life and sort of cutting out the boring parts, right?
Yeah.
And having the most dramatic parts put together. But I will say, because you get from going through that and seeing a beginning, middle, and end for conflict resolution, specifically if it's overlaid with music and emotional reinforcement of people solving their emotional needs and issues, you tend to take something away from that. But I will say this is, if movies are reality with all the boring bits taken out, there's another whole point of, like, of transcendental meditation, which I really don't do, but I understand, is even the boring bits can be incredibly important and infinite. Like, really, every moment is infinite, and you can, if you have a point of realization in your life, you're sitting in the sun in the backyard and you go, this is probably the most amazing moment that one can have, right? Where where you see nature and you become at one with the universe. That's all really important. That gives you something that is important and different. So I would say, if movie making is important and boiling out the boring part is important, at the same time, sometimes the boring part is the most important and really infinite, you know, and and
Well,
and you you have to embrace that boring part, because it has all this other stuff in it. Now, it might not make for a good story, right? But as humans, I think we have to accept, really good movies, and then we also have to take times to smell the roses and sit in the sun.
Yeah. That's you really articulated the gap is where the action is. It's that resonating interval because either Matisse or Cezanne said if you paint your painting and you put it in the bushes and it blends in, it's a good painting. I always love that one. But I had it come true, John. When COVID hit and I was watching the Ann Arbor Film Festival on my computer screen in my backyard, a hummingbird in the film flew through the screen, and I turned my head, and a hummingbird flew by my computer live.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic, Gerry.
So
That's
that
great.
was just
It's like
like that whole thing.
the
You know,
synchronicity of life.
yeah, the synchronicity of life. That's when I worked for George Carlin, we got a flyer in the mail that I always will repeat. It says, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. But I want to ask you a couple more, and hopefully you'll do a part two because we only got through like 14 questions, and I really want to get into your career and your creative process. And here's the next one. Poet Fanny Howe said, the point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't. Now, I don't know what she means, and I'm always curious how people react to that. Any comment?
Because life is worth living and it isn't. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's she says the point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
it isn't worth living.
Well,
Um,
that's what's implied, yeah.
yeah, I don't get it because again, you're on the path from raindrop to ocean. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You're on that path. We're we're all humans. We all have a shelf life, right?
yeah,
So you basically, I art though is, like there can be art that is incredibly analytical, and then there can be art that's just vibrating, like
yeah,
it's just like Bob Dylan, and he's the radio, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And but then again, in the intellectual discourse, we all talked about that at the beginning. That's where it gets really heady because that intellectual discourse of somebody's thought on a piece of art, which is their analysis of what they think is important to them right now and how to show their point of view on it. It's your each person is a moving target that accepts that in a different way.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's the great thing about art. It can mean different things to different people depending on their own point of view.
Yeah, that's actually what McLuhan did mid-career. He changed his most famous aphorism, the medium is the message or the medium is the massage, to the user is the content. So when you
Hmm.
brought up, where you really hit my heart and soul was when you brought up abstract kinetic film like Len Lai. I was like, dude,
Yeah.
that to me was the pinnacle of Ann Arbor for me. Watching these post office commercials that Len Lai did without a camera,
Yes, that's
cameraless
right.
filmmaking. And it really hit us, And when you say raindrop to ocean, then you go back to the whole river motif that's run through this whole conversation because, the end of Finnegan's Wake, the woman, the protagonist of the book, turns into a river.
Uh-huh.
Like, and
Wow.
it's just forever flowing. And so this is we can close off this session. It's good. I hopefully we can do a part two, John. It could be an 8-part Netflix series. Talking with you. I love this because it really is stimulating and I'm learning a lot. But I hold this question till later, but it came up so much. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue, and you've constantly referred to the inner dialogue, the interior dialogue. Marshall wrote a whole book called Interior Landscape. So, what language is your inner dialogue in?
Uh, I would say it's 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 emotional, you know,
Yeah.
because and you, it's almost like your mind has created avatars,
Yeah.
which are the confident John, the insecure John, the youngest child John, the boss at work John, which is like, I, as a youngest child, I had to learn how to be the boss, right? And so all these, it's like your mind is so good at creating and you know, folders for things, that it's created these, all these different personalities that talk to one another.
Yeah.
And you know, so the language would be the emotional sort of point of view of each of these people that make up you, right?
Yeah.
And you know, you might say, well, remember how, like for instance, in your mind, you'd go, the confident person might say to the insecure person, well, remember when you got hurt? Did you really like taking that chance and getting hurt? You know what I mean? And then the confident person might respond and say, well, you know, it was really scary, but it was also really invigorating
Yeah.
and tremendously fun
Mm.
and stimulating, right? You know, and
Yeah.
so you're and so those are all, again, just adjectives to describe emotion.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's cool, Jerry. Actually, talking to you, really, it's like, you know, having a discussion on philosophy. You know, where
Well, I appreciate that because you know,
you
saying emotional, here's what I get, John. In saying it's multiple, there's many voices inside my head. I mean, I get all kinds of answers to that question. And my
Mhm.
favorite, one of my favorites is Abigail Childs, who's a great experimental filmmaker in New York City. She's shown in Ann Arbor many times. Her Emma Goldman films, amazing. I says,
Mhm.
"What language is your inner dialogue in?" She goes, "I wish I knew." See, at least, you know, we you articulated it's emotional, and I mean, it's like, um, so, you know, we can't separate. When I asked earlier, emotion and, are we more emotional? Are we more head or are we more heart? Are we more feeling or more thinking? You can't separate them. They're so connected, but we think we
Mhm.
can because we invented the word thinking and we invented the word feeling, like you use
Mhm.
emotion. But it really reminds me of what I get, which we have the common love is jazz. And
Mhm.
Thelonious Monk said music is math, and it's like for him, it's like the farthest thing. When we hear it, it's all emotion. I mean, to me, but indeed, it is math, and I think that's what you do with your career is you've been able to fuse the two and morph, you know, merge them, the feeling and the thinking, because being in computer and special effects and IT is a brain activity. But then what was your big thing I learned today is you can't go, well, what do you want? What do you want to the director? No, how do you want this to feel? Like you
Yeah.
really learned the magic of words.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I've learned my lesson. It's because it's an easier thing to describe, you
Yeah,
know. But you know, music is math. I mean, to me, the thing that drives me insanely uh, and gets me insanely excited, Jerry, is
yeah,
understanding how music can immediately make you feel an emotion,
yeah,
or you immediately are taken someplace that you feel very familiar
yeah,
with, like, I've been here before, I like this. and
yeah,
and then all of a sudden it's like cadence of a haiku of
yeah,
rhythm. And that's why jazz is so insanely great, because you listen to a Joe Henderson solo, and
yeah.
it's just like he's playing himself into a corner, and then he plays himself out of the
Oh,
corner. You know what I mean?
like
And it's just
sunny,
like,
yeah,
wow, that
like
is
sunny.
so
Yeah. Yeah, Sonny
It,
Rollins, he comes off the stage at the end of the show, and he goes backstage, and he keeps playing, and the guys in his band go, "Dude, we're done." He goes, "I'm still trying to work things out." And in the other
yeah.
one, you'll love this. The greatest artist in Venice is Duggo, and he says, "He's taught me so much." And he said, Thelonious Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them, which is an
Yeah.
amazing thing, back to math. But John, it's
Well,
really
yeah.
been
Or you think about like Philip Glass. Like
yeah,
Philip Glass has repetitive rhythms. And I once described to my son Miles, I said, in some ways, Miles, listening to Philip Glass is an audio analogy to my brain when it gets on a problem and it can't let go of that problem.
very
Like,
good.
like, what is this? 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 What is it? What is it? It might make me. It's like sculpting, or sanding wood, or sculpting rock,
Yeah,
and
it's that. Yeah,
or water flowing over rock, like it
really
it
good.
it just reminds me of that so much, and that relationship between cognitive um, experience
Yeah,
and cadence, whether
yeah,
it be music or imagery,
yeah,
really, it's like I've often thought, and I probably should do this, is I'm really fascinated by brain study in this, like
yeah,
why we like certain music, why we like certain just visual stimuli, or even just a rhythm. You know what I mean? Like like I've done a lot of movies where I've had to do that. I actually saw this person last night, did some work for me in this movie City of Angels. When this angel falls to earth, there's this little abstract film I made that is his imagery right as he falls to earth afterwards. And I remember we talked about it. I said, I remember when I asked you to do this, I said it's like a visual haiku of being born. You know what I
it's
mean? Like what imagery might flash through. And they were all like these flashes that just would come in a road, like on a tube, and leave a trailing image. And that is the type of shit that my love of abstract film has incorporated back into my career all the time. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because whenever I see a chance to do that, it because that is it's sort of like an undiscovered country. Like no one knows why we like these things so
yeah,
much, how they get through, but it's like a cross between art, music, filmmaking, and neurology, right?
yeah.
You know.
It's amazing because earlier, John, you actually almost quoted Frank Zappa's line in Hot Rats. He goes, "This is a movie for your ears."
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
And also, I recommend you check out this woman I interviewed I don't know, a half a year ago. She engineered 5 Prince albums when she was like 20. She just fell into this thing, and since then she teaches exactly what you just labeled. She teaches music metacognition at Berkeley. And
Really?
oh yeah, I mean it's a big it's
Can you send me some
yeah,
stuff on her?
I'll send you the
Yeah.
link. And she's
Yeah.
amazing how well she can articulate all that what you just said. And then I always go
Yeah, because
to
Jerry, it's magic. It's like
yeah,
it really is magic, and it gets down to like sometimes I'll be playing guitar late at night, and I won't even know why I'm playing
yeah,
what I'm playing, but it's just like literally just close your eyes and do what you like. And I
yeah.
described it once to this taxi driver. He was taking me to the airport, and he goes, "Man, you were in the groove, man."
Definitely. And I was gonna say, if you haven't seen, just watch 2 minutes of any of the clips of Joni's jam at the Hollywood Bowl a couple days ago. It is like I just break down in tears. It's amazing. She's on this gold throne and she's banging this cane and she's backed by the greatest people in the world. And it's just
Mhm.
like one big hootenanny, and you can't stop from like crying. It's like so emotional. But it's like what Igor Stravinsky lectured on at Big College. Music means nothing. And
Wow.
it's like, yeah, it's probably the opposite. It means so much that you can't put it into words. Walter Pater said all art aspires to the condition of music. That means like painting, poetry, architecture, film, all wishes it could be as cool as music.
Well, I've often thought jazz music is sort of a very high form of art because it's like paint me a picture I'm watching. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You
Yeah.
know,
Well, that,
and you don't get to, like, for me, I'll work years on making something that's
yeah.
90 minutes or 2 hours long, right?
Yeah.
So I get a chance to boil down the bouillabaisse, to boil down the tomato sauce until it's really rich. And
Yeah.
whereas jazz musicians, again, they become the filter, and then it's like they're the radio. Like, I like the Bob Dylan quote.
Well,
It's
listen,
just
John, you nailed this because paint the painting I'm watching. Like, okay, I got a new workshop that's called Time-Based Media's live stream. So my friend said the other day that 10% of everything being watched now is live. So, this is an amazing phenomenon because I sort of specialize in the history of live cinema. And
yeah.
so Coppola's been trying to do this. Like New York Times Sunday Magazine, like 1 week ago, Coppola's saying, I want to make movies that are live being made at that moment. I says, dude, Jack Smith did that years ago. Jack Smith in New York would get everybody in his apartment for a film night, and he'd say, okay, it starts at 9 p.m. And then he wouldn't start till 2 in the morning. So everybody's there like, dude, it's been 6 hours. We're all crashed out and stoned. Then he would start feeding 16 millimeter film into his projector that wasn't edited. He would just feed in the strips.
Wow.
So it was a film being made live at that moment.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he's sort of the inventor of performance art. If you study performance art, it's Alan Caprow and Jack Smith. But it's been around since cave time. But it is this amazing thing. How are we going to deal with everything being what we just did, John, for 60 plus 100 minutes? What we've done together is called TV television. I mean,
Hmm.
not it's telephone television. We
Right.
we've been live across the world for 100 minutes. When that was started was basically 1939, the year Finnegan's Wake came out, at the New
Mhm.
York World's Fair. They showed
Wow.
telephone. Then in 68, the guy you mentioned, Kubrick, made it a reality for us because the guy calls his daughter from the spaceship and wishes her a happy birthday on TV television, which now all we do is refer to it as Zoom because the great Aretha Franklin nailed it. She goes, "Who's zooming who?"
Right. Right. Right.
So it's
Well,
like,
yeah.
I'm
It
dying to know your whole thing, but in part two, we can go into this. How is this going to change the world that cinema is not going to be time-based anymore? It's going to be live and happening.
Well, I think actually, Gerry, you're a really gifted interviewer because you you ask such questions that are they're like deep philosophical questions, and so you make, at least for me, you make me go to a place that goes like, okay, well, how deep down in the center of your core beliefs, like what, how can you answer that? And
Yeah.
again, it's like, this seems, I've done a lot of these Zooms where we talk about different problems, talk about like a project, how to make something happen, or make a
Yeah.
story get better. But this is, it's like therapy, Gerry. It's like, it is, because it forces you to articulate things that you feel and don't normally articulate.
That's
You
what
know.
I'm after, is like to jump out of your stock lines and,
Hmm.
yeah, I really appreciate your time and energy, John. And I always appreciate you, like you mentioned earlier, running into you on the street spontaneously. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
catch me in my bicycle garb.
Yeah,
I'm like
that's the
Lawrence
greatest.
of Arabia.
And
Hat on.
I'm gonna do the wiki quote on Lawrence of Arabia, man. I know that's packed with some great thoughts that you brought up. So
I
I
mean,
really
the two best movies to quote are Lawrence of Arabia and Apocalypse Now.
wow.
Apocalypse Now is really, really great. You know,
Yes,
you know.
Apocalypse Now and
And
Lawrence.
Gerry, yeah, Gerry. The reason I know this is that when they released the soundtrack for Apocalypse Now, it was one of the first soundtracks where they released a lot of spoken word from the movie that's in the soundtrack. And
Really?
so when you listen to the soundtrack, it's like listening to the movie, you
Oh
know.
my God.
It's like, there are so many, it might have been my mission, but it sure shit was the Chiefs boat. I mean, it's like, you know I wanted a mission, and for my sins they gave me one, and when it was over I'd never want
Wow.
another.
So is that Conrad or John Milius? Is it Milius rephrasing Joseph Conrad, or is it
I
strictly?
guess. I mean, because it's Martin Sheen saying it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's so. I would think so, or Francis, but
Well, Hitchcock and McLuhan's favorite joke. Two goats are eating film coming out of a film can right over here in Culver City. Lot in the back lot, and one goat turns to the other and go, "The book was better."
ah!
Anyways, John, I'm going to hit the end broadcast button. I hope this never ends and we can keep
All right.
talking forever and ever. Thank
We
you
get
so
Gerry. If
much.
you want to do it again, just let's set a date. We'll do it.
We'll do it
You know.
again. I look forward to part two. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your time and
So is
energy.
this last minute, these 100 minutes, they've been going out to over the universe. They're out. They're
They're,
out.
they're all there. Here's the miracle. When I hit the end broadcast button, it's on YouTube forever.
Wow. Wow. Send me the link so I
I
can at
will.
least see it. All
I'll
right.
send you a link. Thanks, John. I
All
love
right.
you,
All right.
man.
We'll see you,
Appreciate
Gerry.
it.
Thanks a lot. We'll see
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.